Hey, have you been watching basketball lately thinking, why are teams without a big three looking really good? Because I sure have. But if you've got any thoughts about that, leave it down in the comments below and I'll give you my thoughts on it. Because I think there's a lot of reasons that are leading towards the big three era ending. And if any of that interests you, yeah, like, subscribe, and we'll get right into it. This is Mile High Hoops. So, if we're looking at the NBA today, there's teams like the Utah Jazz that are doing really well without a big three. There's the Bucks, who don't have Chris Middleton, and I don't even know if you'd classify Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday in a big three or not. And they're doing really well. There's teams like the Trailblazers, who have Damian Lillard and a bunch of other guys that are doing really well. And I think these are key teams to look at right now in this discussion because there's been experiments like Kyrie, James Harden, Kevin Durant that haven't worked. There's been teams like Steph, KD, Klay Thompson that have worked, LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love that have worked. But I think those have been a while ago now when the NBA was quite different. And I think if we look back to kind of when the Warriors exploded with Steph Curry kind of leading the way with threes with Klay Thompson, that kind of was like this tipping point in the big three era kind of ending. And but nobody had really seen that yet because people saw kind of the LeBron big threes and thought like, oh, that's got to be the model. But really what the model that the Warriors were showing was, let's have a couple of these guys that can do a lot of things with a lot of role players that are really good at multiple things, but not quite stars. And the Rockets in that like 2016 era saw kind of that idea and wanted to go down the road of heliocentrism. And this is something that Thinking Basketball has coined that term. And that's just having this one elite table setter around a bunch of role-playing shooters alongside a what I will call a rim-protecting lob threat center. And I think that was a good experiment and showed a good path towards being a good team. It's just it was implemented a little shakily. And then now where we are at is that the average role player in the NBA is just so much better than what they were maybe 10, 15 years ago or further. I mean, we look at players like Desmond Bane, Klay Thompson. I mean, these are guys that technically are role players, I would say. And the role player term has gotten such a stigma at this point that people think, oh, a role player can't be an all-star, can't be an all-NBA player because it's a role player. No, you're a role player because you're out there and you're really good at what you do, specifically filling in gaps. And if you fill in a gap so well, you can be an all-NBA guy. Because if you put Klay Thompson on any team where he can just space the floor and light it up, yeah, he's not dribbling the ball and isolating a million times and having this crazy high usage rate that people seem to think that makes you a superstar. But no, he's doing it differently. He's catching it and getting buckets. He's playing defense, filling that role. And if you think about it that way, I mean, you can say that Luka Doncic is a role player because he plays his role, whatever. You know. Anyways, there's dumb stigma around that. And based around these great role players that are doing all these different things and how we want to just shoot a bunch of threes and have this guy that kind of sets the table for everybody, mismatch hunting became crazy prevalent. I mean, we saw the Rockets kind of like scientifically go about this with small ball. And small ball is kind of another route that the NBA is going, which we're kind of splitting into a couple different routes based on what kind of players you have. And all of them seem to be working kind of similarly, but a little bit differently. And we'll get into kind of the archetypes that fit into these categories in a second. But with this mismatch hunting, small ball has kind of become a better idea based around like, oh, if we can have all these guys on the court that can switch, shoot threes, and maybe a couple of them that can dribble and maybe guard the rim, then we've kind of got all the roles that we need fleshed out, and we can just be really good. And I mean, there's issues with that, because then if you run into what I call the hub of a Jokic, Giannis, or Embiid, you can't really win the battle with the small ball because you're going to get destroyed in the paint. There's all these different issues. That's a whole nother video topic, but I think what this has transitioned to with the small ball era is that we've got these different types of bigs, and that's kind of what I was alluding to before. But so we've got the rim protecting lob threat big, and these are all names that I kind of just made up. They're kind of like 2K things where it says like all around threat, whatever. But like the rim protecting lob threat, these are your quintessential go out there, you're going to catch a lob, you're going to guard the three, or not guard the three, guard the rim, and you're going to basically never touch the ball unless you're grabbing a rebound or a alley-oop or something, which are very valuable to teams. I mean, we look at JaVale McGee, Clint Capella, Rudy Gobert. They're all really good at what they do because they're just out there being a target. They're vertical spacing. They alter shots when people drive, making other players' jobs harder. And this is a route that you can go if you don't want to go small ball. And this is a route that has seemed to work. The Warriors have used this tactic quite a bit in their run. LeBron's teams have kind of done this same thing, and I think that this is a valuable type of player to have. But as we'll see with these other archetypes, this is not an archetype that I would say could be a superstar anymore. And then we can switch to switchable bigs, and these are like your Kevon Looney's, your Grant Williams, your maybe Robert Covington at this point. And these guys are important because they're not really like big bigs anymore, because they're not like 7-footers usually, but they are like, these are kind of like your small ball fives a little bit. And like Kevon Looney can switch out on point guards and hold his own pretty well because he's got really good feet, and he's a pretty good passer. So all these extra tools that they have, like passing, maybe shooting like Grant Williams, or rebounding really well, these are all really valuable tools to add to this, and what makes one of these types of centers a starter instead of maybe a bench guy. And then if we move on to my final category for centers, and that's the hub. I mentioned this before. It's Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid. These are your centers, and I have Giannis in here because I think he's pretty much a center at this point, that can like start fast breaks, whether that's a pass, whether it's putting it on deck yourself, they're getting to the rim, whether that's with a Euro step as a 7-footer or just dunking it on them. They can kind of do all of the things that you need them to do at such an elite level that they are just very valuable. I'm going to say they're all great passers. They're all great post-up guys that can pass out of the post. Not all of them can shoot, but if you can, that's valuable. Like Jokic and Embiid are great mid-range and okay three-point shooters, and Giannis not so much. But Giannis's athleticism is this tool that he's got that those other guys don't have as much of. And these are your quintessential like superstar, where you want to shoot for types of bigs to be an MVP Hall of Fame level type guy. And I've got Alperen Sengun on this page with him because I think he's a guy that is funneling into that category. But remember, there is tiers to this. Just because he is funneling that archetype does not mean he will ever reach the peak that these guys have, because he could just end up being a hub of a very small level guy. Anyways, if we get to everyone else, so these are point guards, shooting guards, small forwards. Basically, it's all the same position at this point anymore, because we now have a league of bigs and not bigs. And so I'm going to start with elite role players. This is where things get a little hazy for me because I think that elite role players could be a 3-and-D guy. They could be a like a hustle guy that is also kind of good at shooting threes, but also is a good defender or something. You know, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but this is like I said before, your Klay Thompson, your Desmond Bane, your Andrew Wiggins. I almost put Kawhi in here, which is hazy to me because like Kawhi is a bucket getter, but Kawhi is also such a good 3-and-D guy that if he needed to just be a role player on a team, he could do that and he would succeed. I put him in a different category. But these guys are just your dudes that are going to go out there, play defense, shoot threes, and then have these other aspects to their game that are super beneficial to them. But these guys at this point in time all have the 3-point shooting and defense in common. Like Dorian Finney-Smith is another guy's in there, or the guy that's in there. And to the way that you go up this tier is if you can be a better shooter and a better defender alongside additional skills like Wiggins has the ISO scoring. Desmond Bane's just an elite shooter at this point, so I mean he's catapulting himself up there. And so there's a lot of different ways to go up in that. And then I've got bucket getters is my next category, and I think as far as these other guys' tiers go, I think all of these tiers you can end up being a Hall of Fame level guy. Not so much with the centers anymore, like I was saying, but with bucket getters, these are guys that can go out there and they'll just get you a bucket. They don't have to do anything else because if you outscore the opponent, that's great. And if they do other things, well, then they're just that much more valuable. Think about Steph Curry. I mean, he's a pretty good table setter, but he's an elite bucket getter. And Kevin Durant, he can kind of do some of these other things, but he will go get you points. I have Damian Lillard on here. He'll go get you points. These guys that are funneling into this category through drafts, Anthony Simons, Jordan Poole, they'll go get you points. That's what you need to win a basketball game. And then our final tier, or final archetype is operators. And this is Luka, LeBron, Jimmy Butler. And then I've got like Josh Giddey is the kind of guy that's like the soon to be maybe. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to reach this tier, you know. But again, he follows that same archetype. These are your guys that are running your pick and rolls. They can also get like tons of points if you need them to, because there's a little bit of overlap whether or not they're an operator or bucket getter. Again, it's all subjective, but these guys are going to be running fast breaks. They're going to be finding shooters all the time, whether that is in a pick and roll or just in a fast break. But this is, I think, like another one of the quintessential elite of the elite categories. Like the two best of all time players like LeBron and Michael Jordan, I think would fit in bucket getter and operator tier. And then I think with this new hub category, which didn't really exist back in the day, I think this is another tier where you could see like the best of the best players come from. And I guess like guys like Hakeem and some of those other bigs back in the day would have fit more in some of these other types of categories, centers. But again, I think the NBA is just so much better now. The role players are better than the role players back in the day, and we are where we are because of everyone becoming a better player. Hey, so I hated the way I ended that video, and so this is me after work now. Where I was getting to was, why would you want a big three nowadays? Especially when these role players are paid so much less. They do more than they ever have for any team ever before. And then you're kind of breaking these responsibilities of these superstars up into other guys who are also very talented basketball players. And when you've got these guys that are getting paid less than the superstar all NBA level guys that do damn near the same amount of stuff, it's a pretty good deal. Like, just off the top of my head, if we take Bradley Beal, for example. Bradley Beal scoring, I mean, it's down this year. Maybe like it's 25 a game or something. How much more valuable is that 25 points a game compared to, like, let's just say if like Clay was hurt all season and Jordan Poole averaged 25 points this year. Like, Jordan's is on a winning team, and Bradley Beal is making $254 million or something. It just, there's a lot to think about there. The value of players nowadays is just very strange to me. Like, that all-time super loaded contract for the Supermax should be reserved for your like Giannis, Luka, Jokic, Embiid, Steph Curry, you know, those type of guys that are top of the tier of whatever they do. And like Bradley Beal had like a 30-point per game season, or like 32 or something. But it's, what was the point? Their team was bad. They didn't have like a good set of guys around him. And they had mostly Russell Westbrook the year before that, I think. But again, like where I'm getting at, they are improving. They got KCP, good role player, good 3-and-D wing. They got Kuzma, who's like a good athletic 3-and-D floor spacing, slashing type power forward wing guy. So they're going in the right direction, but it is rough. I am of the mindset that if you're going to play this new age style of small ball to like kind of this spread offense basketball, that you need to go one of the two routes. If you can coach your team up like the Warriors have done with all the space and movement and cutting and moving without the ball, curling, read and react, these sort of things on offense, which are hard to coach and harder to get everyone to buy into, I believe that is one route that this can work really well and you can see success. But that is a much tougher ask because you need to have someone that can shoot about as good as Steph Curry if you want it to be as successful as possible. The other route, which I think is more attainable, is get an operator or a hub and surround them with as many 3-and-D wings as you possibly can, and then have a bucket getter on your team somewhere, whether that's off the bench or in your starting lineup. Preferably off your bench, I would say, because in your starting lineup, you've got your hub or your operator to do a vast majority of scoring and distributing to three-point shooters. And then, I'm real country. But, and if, let's say, if you have an operator, you have a lob threat center, or you could have a switchable one. Doesn't matter. Both are good. It depends on if you want to go small ball or not small ball. And if you have a hub, maybe you just have like a 3-and-D guard as your point guard. Doesn't really matter if he is a great like passer or anything. Just make sure he's a guy that can dribble and attack the rim, and can also shoot and can defend a little bit. I think those are the two like real routes. Yeah, I mean, if we kind of consider teams that are doing that, that's like we said, the Bucks, the Nuggets, the 76ers. You can see like some of these teams are kind of implementing some of these ideas, like the Rockets. The Rockets got Sengun, which I put Sengun in this archetype, but he is not on the same level as those other guys. But they've got Jabari Smith Jr., who they just drafted as like their 3-point shooting small or power forward. They've got guards that are athletic, that can slash, that can kind of shoot. Not really defenders yet, but we'll see how that goes. The Thunder, they got Josh Giddey. They've got their lob threat, rim protecting. We'll see what else he can do. Center, Chet Holmgren, Pokashevsky is interesting, like as like a type of like hub enforcer type dude, but really have to see. But anyways, you get the gist. And I think that's pretty much the end of it. If you stayed this long, you're super tight, and I love you from the bottom of my heart. So please smack that like button with your cheeks, and also subscribe with them while you're at it. And actually, while I've got you here, I did just remember, if you are some of the few people watching from the Philippines or South Korea, you are absolutely fucking sick. So thank you for that. And I do notice those things. So everyone, you have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you next time.